Choosing and practicing virtues. Welcome back to our series on the Introduction to the Devout Life by Saint Francis de Sales. In our previous episode, we explored the grace-filled power of the sacraments in helping us live a devout life. And today, we will take the next step in our spiritual journey, learning how to choose and practice virtues. Saint Francis de Sales emphasizes that growing in virtue is essential for all religions, as it forms the foundation of our relationship with God and with others. Let us dive into how we can intentionally choose and cultivate virtues in our everyday lives. Why practicing virtue is central to devotion? Saint Francis de Sales reminds us that devotion is not just about spiritual feelings or isolated practices, but about living a virtuous life. True devotion leads to action, and action rooted in virtue transforms our entire being. For those of us in religious life, whether we are priests, nuns, or seminarians, the virtues we practice shape our ministries, our communities, and our relationship with God. Virtue, Saint Francis de Sales says, is like the fruit of a well-cultivated garden. Just as a gardener must carefully tend to the plants, watering them and removing weeds, we must nurture virtues and remove vices from our hearts. Virtues help us to live more fully in God's grace, allowing our actions to flow naturally from a place of love and charity. For example, think of a priest who not only preaches about patience, but lives it, who remains calm in the face of difficulties, who listens attentively to his parishioners even when time is short. His practice of patience makes his ministry more effective and reflects Christ to those he serves. This is the power of virtue in action. Choosing specific virtues to cultivate. So, how do we know which virtues we should focus on? Saint Francis de Sales offers us some helpful guidance. He explains that while all virtues are good, we can't focus on everything at once. Instead, we need to discern which virtues are most important for our particular state in life and the challenges we face. Step 1. Identify your weaknesses. First, take a good look at yourself. Where are your weaknesses? Saint Francis suggests that we start by choosing virtues that will help counteract our most common temptations. If you struggle with impatience, for example, begin by cultivating the virtue of patience. If you tend to be overly focused on your work and neglect community life, focus on the virtue of charity or humility. Saint Francis de Sales tells us that this kind of self-examination is key to making progress in the devout life. It's not about being perfect, but about knowing where we need to grow and inviting God into that process. Step 2. Consider your vocation and duties. Consider the specific responsibilities of your vocation. What virtues will help you fulfill your role as a priest, as a nun, or as a seminarian? For example, if you are a parish priest, the virtue of patience and empathy is essential when dealing with difficult situations in ministry. If you are in a religious community, Humility and gentleness will help you live peacefully with others and foster unity in your community living. St. Francis de Sales calls these virtues choice fruits that are specifically suited to our individual circumstances. By focusing on virtues that are directly related to our duties and weaknesses, we can grow steadily in holiness. Practicing virtues daily. Once we have chosen which virtues to focus on, the next step is to practice them daily. St. Francis de Sales offers a few practical tips on how to do this. Tip 1. Small acts of virtue. He encourages us to start small, just as muscle grows stronger with regular exercise. Virtues grow when we practice them in small, everyday situations. For example, if you are working on patience, practice it in small moments, like when someone interrupts you or when things don't go as planned. Don't wait for big challenges to test your virtue. It is the little daily acts that make the most difference. Tip 2. Reflect on your progress. St. Francis de Sales recommends reflecting regularly on how you are doing. At the end of each day, take a few minutes to review how well you practiced the virtue you are working on. Were there moments where you succeeded? Were there times where you fell short? This daily reflection will help you stay focused and make steady progress. Tip 3. Rely on God's grace. Finally, remember that practicing virtue isn't something we do by our own strength. St. Francis de Sales emphasizes that all growth in virtue comes from God's grace. Our job is to cooperate with that grace, to keep trying, even when we stumble. If we remain faithful and humble, God will help us grow in the virtues we need to live out our vocation with joy. The role of prayer and sacraments in virtue. St. Francis de Sales also reminds us that we cannot grow in virtue without the help of prayer and the sacraments. Regular prayer keeps us connected to God's grace, while the sacraments, especially the Eucharist and confession, nourish our souls and strengthen our resolve. Prayer opens our hearts to God's guidance, while the sacraments cleanse us from sin and fills us with the grace to persevere. If you find yourself struggling to practice a particular virtue, turn to God in prayer and ask for the grace you need. Frequent confession is also helpful, as it gives us a chance to reflect on our weaknesses and receive God's mercy. In summary, choosing and practicing virtue is essential for living a devout life. St. Francis encourages us to focus on virtues that directly counter our weaknesses and support our vocation. By practicing these virtues daily, especially in small ways, we can grow steadily in holiness. And most importantly, we must remember that it's God's grace that enables us to grow in virtue. So we should always remain close to Him in prayer and through the sacraments. As we close, let's review a few key takeaways from today's session. 1. Virtue is the foundation of devotion. Living a devout life means growing in specific virtues that reflect God's love. 2. Choose virtues based on your weaknesses. Start by focusing on virtues that counteract your most common temptations or challenges. 3. Focus on your vocation. Choose virtues that help you fulfill the duties of your specific state in life, whether you are a priest, a nun, or a seminarian. 4th, practice virtue daily. Growth happens through small, everyday acts of virtue. So be patient with yourself and persevere. And the 5, rely on grace through prayer and sacraments. Regular prayer and participation in the sacraments are essential to growing in virtue. Thank you for joining me today as we explored how to choose and practice virtues in our daily lives. In our next episode, we will look at the beautiful virtue of humility and how it transforms our hearts and ministries. Live Jesus.